You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today is episode 318, The Hidden Cost of Perfectionism. If you're a small business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Today, we're going to be diving into the topic of how perfectionism may be showing up in your business and how you can use guardrails to curb your perfectionism so that you can stop sabotaging your business. And I took the lens of giving examples of how this may be showing up in your day-to-day life, business, because if you would have asked me almost a decade ago, many years ago, if I suffered with perfectionism, I would have told you no because of my perception of what perfectionism was. My perception of perfectionism was that it had to be perfect, that I was striving for it to be perfect. And I did not resonate with that. However, after diving deeper and coaching and being well experienced in owning a business, there is a very vast and wide definition and example of how the underlying word or the underlying thought process of perfectionism can be showing up and sabotaging your success. Before we dive into that topic today, I would like to invite you to take my next level business owner quiz. If you have not already done so, I am inviting you to hit pause on this podcast and head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. Take this short 3-minute quiz to find out what's most holding you back from taking your business to the next level. And in return, after you find out what is actually holding you back, I will give you a curated playlist of Small Business Straight Talk on specific episodes that address those specific challenges so that you can overcome them. What is more productive than getting a very customized playlist of solutions that can get you to that next level? Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. And now, let's get to the straight talk. One study of nearly 42,000 young people around the world found that perfectionism has risen over the last 27 years. The word perfectionist can sound like a positive attribute, someone who works hard and puts in all the effort needed to get it right. But I would ask, at what cost? There are significant downsides to perfectionism we need to be aware of as business owners, so I am going to be diving into the hidden costs of perfectionism, as well as guardrails you can use to curb your perfectionist tendencies. Without effectively implementing guardrails, research says perfectionism can lead to numerous detrimental work and non-work outcomes, including higher levels of burnout, stress, workaholism, anxiety, and depression. So what actually makes someone a perfectionist? Let's dive into that so that you can identify if you have these tendencies and want to apply some of these guardrails I'm going to be sharing with you. According to research discussed in length on Science Direct, there are two distinct but related subdimensions of perfectionism. The first, which we can call excellence-seeking perfectionism, involves tendencies to fixate on and demand excessively high standards. Excellence-seeking perfectionists not only stringently evaluate their own performance, but also hold a high performance expectation for others in their lives. The second, which we'll call failure-avoiding perfectionism, involves an obsessive concern with the aversion to failing to reach high performance standards. Failure-avoiding perfectionists are constantly worried their work isn't quite right or good enough and believe that they will lose respect from others if they do not achieve perfection. This is what I relate to. Failure-avoiding perfectionism. But my narrow definition used to be only the one of excellence-seeking perfectionism, and that didn't resonate with me. I'm so glad that I was able to identify that there are two kinds, and I identified it, but not as well as this. And Science Direct has now come out with research that says that there are two very distinct ways of looking at perfectionism. I want to ask you, can you relate? Can you relate to both? Can you relate to one of them? For me, the failure-avoiding perfectionism is the one that definitely shows up for me and is one that I have to work on overcoming. Perfectionism shows up in different forms. If you're a perfectionist, you likely saw these traits in yourself long before you started your business. Possibly in school when creating a project that took way longer than needed because you felt like you had to get it perfect. Or when you studied endlessly for a test in fear of failing or getting anything other than an A+. I know that while I can clearly see these traits as an adult and in the environment of building a business, I can also look back in hindsight's 2020 and see that these traits have been with me for as long as I can remember as a child. Perfectionism in your business shows up in many different forms, such as numerous unfinished projects or being stuck in one project, proposal, presentation, product creation, or blog because you continue to tweak it endlessly. Perfectionism also costs you a lot if you don't keep it in check. Next, I'm going to be going over a list of ways perfectionism is possibly showing up and the hidden costs to you. The first area I want to talk about is your time and energy. Indecisiveness when it comes to making business decisions. This can wear you down mentally and take a lot of time and mental capacity to keep analyzing and reanalyzing options. Sitting in indecisiveness and not being able to take action can be incredibly draining and detrimental to the business. Perhaps you have unfinished tasks and projects that you had put time and energy into, but never put them out into the world. You never finished them, or maybe you did finish it, but your brain told you it's not done because it's not good enough. Or what if I put it out in the world and it fails? And so you're not able to get a return on that investment of time and energy. You put your heart and soul, time, money, energy into this idea, created it, almost got it to the finish line, and yet you're not getting the payback. You're not able to sell it or to help the world with this idea. Next, spinning your wheels doing and redoing a task or project. Endlessly tweaking it. Endlessly thinking, what's the next version? This is a time and energy suck. Those tweaks are often not even seen by other people. They're being seen and they seem glaringly obvious that they needed to be done or that they were done to you. But the rest of the world, it didn't make that big of an impact as you have invested that additional time and energy. How about hyper-focusing on one task or project, like laser-focused, at the expense of other responsibilities, other projects, other people, other areas of your business? When we hyper-focus through the lens of trying to create perfectionism or coming from the fear of failure, We, in fact, are dropping other things, like dropping those plates, dropping those responsibilities, or how does the saying go, dropping those balls, right? And so the ability to hyper-focus can be good in certain situations. But if it's being fueled by perfectionism, and then you're paying a cost in other areas of your business, it's not serving you well. The next area is money. So we just talked about time and energy, but perfectionism and the cost of perfectionism can definitely show up in your finances. Have you ever invested in an idea, technology, project, program, course, book, etc., but never took action? Felt like you were in this constant loop of learning and thinking you had more to learn, fearing that you wouldn't be able to actually take action in a way that was perfect enough or that had zero risk of failure? Or perhaps you pursued this learning and training and courses and technology and always thinking that there was something else that you needed to be able to take action, and you didn't strike when the iron was hot. Somebody else came up with the idea. Somebody else hit the market first. Perhaps that was not well invested money. And we can also take that into the other extent of if you are always pursuing that you need to know more and do more without taking action, is that actually a good return on your investment, your money investment, to keep consuming things? Or perhaps you're buying them and not even consuming them. That's a whole nother thing, right? Is that your brain says you need something, there's a gap, that you need some sort of support, and you buy it, you spend the money, and then you don't actually consume that content, to learn that content, to be able to take action and ultimately get a return on that investment. All right, next I want to talk about health. Perfectionism will most certainly show up as looking like stress. The stress of fear, the stress of failure, the stress of not meeting somebody else's standards or your own standards. Perfectionism can affect your sleep and exhaustion. Have you ever taken a project and just continually tweaked it through the night? I know I have. I know that when I started speaking, I would travel and I would speak and I would stay up almost all night long tweaking and rehearsing and practicing for the presentation the next day. And all of that was fueled by perfectionism. How about poor nutrition? Or overworking yourself to exhaustion, not taking breaks, whether that's breaks in the day or a 3-day weekend or vacation, because you're always pursuing and working really, really hard in pursuit of perfectionism, whatever that looks like for you, however that shows up for you. Or maybe it's the opposite. Perfectionism can also show up with an obsession about your nutrition, fitness, body images. And that can be the other way of exhaustion and stress, is that you're obsessing about some area of your personal life, trying to pursue perfectionism in that area. Let's talk about burnout. Perfectionism and burnout go hand in hand. You can't push yourself that hard consistently. You can't doubt yourself. You can't get in your head. You can't continually look for something being perfect or running on the motivation of avoiding failure without often getting to a point where you've pushed yourself for too long and too hard and you've gotten to burnout. Or depression. Depression, because of the mindset, because of the filter in which you see the work you put out into the world or how you show up or how you look, can often be this negative feedback loop that is a perfect environment to becoming depressed. Let's jump into another arena of your life, relationships. Perfectionism can have a cost on your relationships because you're judging other people. You maybe not understand why they don't have as high standards as you do for yourself. Why don't they work as well as you do? Why don't they tweak and create something to such high levels? And now you're frustrated. Now, this could be with a loved one, your significant other, or your child, but it most definitely can be showing up in your relationship with team members, in that you have such high standards, and this is creating friction and discord in the business and in the culture. How about assuming others are critical of you, even though they may not be? That was me. I always felt like people were being critical of me because that's how I saw the world. Like, that's how I perceived my actions or inactions, that they were always being judged. And the truth is, not a lot of people care, right? The world, like, what is the saying? The world doesn't revolve around you. But when you're in that thought loop, when you believe that, you truly seek like this positive, confirmation that people are judging you and have these high standards of you. And while that may be true sometimes, my thought was it was happening all the time. And now my thought is, sure, it's happening. Maybe it's happening some of the time, but do I really care? Like, I got to a point where I'm like, then I'm not for you. Like, I'm here to serve people that are not being critical and incredibly judging, and like, that's okay. And I just share that experience with you because I have been on every spectrum of it. And I know what it looked like when I was stuck in that loop of thinking everybody's being incredibly critical to, yeah, I get people are critical and they can say, and next, because I'm not for them. Let's talk about self-esteem. And so that leads right into that of what I was just sharing with you. I would not have told you I had self-esteem issues in my 20s and 30s. Like, if you had asked me, I truly didn't feel like I had self-esteem issues. But looking back and understanding that my actions or inactions were really motivated by what I thought people would be thinking, or if they were critical or judging me, clearly that was affecting my self-esteem. And so when you set these impossible standards for yourself, that can often leave you feeling less than. Like, when you have these thoughts that there is one level you need to get to, or one vision of what perfectionism looks like. And that perfectionism can be, you could be obsessing about what perfect looks like. What does a perfect business look like? Is it how many team members you have? Is it how much revenue you make? Is it how much money you make? Is it the type of clients you work with? Is it possibly the way that you look? When you have these high standards and you don't quite meet them, or maybe you're just on the journey to meet them, like everything in between where you're at and that point in which your brain says that looks perfect, that's a perfect vision of a business, can you really be enjoying that journey if you're consistently obsessing about that gap and telling yourself that it's not good enough, instead of reframing it and telling yourself you're on a journey to getting to that place, getting to that goal that you've set for yourself? Which brings me to my next point, which is that perfectionism can be robbing you of your joy. You see, if I'm going to obsess about something, I have changed my mindset and determined that I want to obsess about enjoying the journey and not focusing on the gap of where I want to be. I'm incredibly goal-oriented. And because I'm incredibly goal-oriented, and you may be too, are you looking at it as a gap? Like, you're never quite there. It's the carrot that you can't quite get to, right? And for me, that's how I felt for a long time, until I was like, this is bullshit. Like, as soon as I'm almost ready to reach a goal or to a point, I'm already on to the next one, which means that I'm actually never going to catch that carrot. And so my options were, do I stop setting goals because this consistent, pull to the next thing was not feeling really enjoyable? when really I wanted to reach these goals because in my mind, I thought that would be joy. Like that is success. That is the thing that I want. It will bring me joy. And I flipped that to say, well, that's not going to happen. Like that is ingrained in who I am. I'm incredibly goal oriented. But what I can do is change how I think about it and focus on how can I enjoy the entire journey to reaching that goal. And when I set a different goal, how can I enjoy that journey as well? And I'm not saying that I enjoy the journey 100%. I don't think that that's realistic. But by just asking that question and having that perspective of wanting to enjoy the journey to getting to the goal really brings a lot more joy back. Now, I'm getting a little off base here, but I just wanted to share with you because maybe you're incredibly goal-oriented and perfectionism looks like reaching that goal and nothing else between where you're at and reaching that goal is good enough. And I would encourage you to just explore what could that look like if you honored the process and the journey of reaching those goals. Next, success. Now, when we talked about the two different ways that perfectionism can show up, all of it is driven by success, either perceived success through excellence or failure of quote unquote success. When in fact, my opinion is that by being driven by perfectionism and not having these guardrails and understanding it's happening, it is in fact robbing you of success. I believe that it is holding you back from taking risks because you believe that you can't be perfect at it, or maybe you believe that you could fail at it, so you're not even taking those risks. How about holding back on putting out offers or ways you can serve your clients because you keep tweaking it, right? You can have another way to create revenue in your business, and yet you're putting a halt on it because you literally are like, it's not done, it needs more tweaking. And I have seen this with my clients, and here's my advice on that one. You could be tweaking it, but it's actually counterproductive, not best use of your time, because you're tweaking it through your own lens of what you perceive better or perfect would be, when in fact, if you just take it out to the world will give you feedback. And look, I put stuff out in the world where I was like, this actually needs a lot more work. Like I can totally see what version 2.0 is. And then my clients get that offering or that course or that program, and they're like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And I'm like, really? So it could be that simple? Like, could it really be that simple? Because if I had not put it out in the world, I would have mulled over it and tweaked it and redone it and resaid something on a video and reworked the worksheets. And in reality, if they're getting results, they're happy with it. But also, you could put something out in the world and it wasn't even on your radar where they're like, hey, can you support me in this way? Or what if it could look like this? Or, they're going to show you your gaps. If those gaps are valid, now you have very purposeful tweaks to make, and you'll get a return on that investment because you know that the people out there actually want that feature, that upgrade, that tweak that you're going to be putting your time and energy into. How about not starting a project or taking action on an idea because you doubt your ability? This is not that you take action and you tweak it. This is like, you don't even get to the starting line. This idea is in your head and you don't know where to start because your brain says, I'm not skilled, I'm not capable enough, I don't have the resources. And all of that is through a lens of you can't make it good enough, instead of maybe flipping the script and saying, hey, okay, I have this idea. What help do I need? What skill gaps do I have? What can I do to get version 1.0 out there and then to get feedback? Another thing that I hear often too is we're not starting a project or implementing on an idea and taking action because you're waiting for the perfect time. What? Like, what is the perfect time? I get that we need to make strategic decisions about, when we start a project, what our resources are, timing of the market. But what I'm cautioning you here on is that we can get in this loop, and I have heard it over and over the years of it's not the perfect time. And then when I ask as a coach, what is the perfect time? And there's no answer, then it's not a real reason not to take action. Now, if I ask, well, what would make it perfect time? It could be once I get so-and-so's role up and going and trained. Once we turn the corner on hitting this profitability goal, we'll have the financial resources to take action on this project. Those are very strategic answers to the question of what's perfect time, quote unquote perfect. And I literally have it in my script in quotes. But maybe you're looking for the perfect time because it's through the lens of perfectionism. So you might have recognized yourself in just a few or many of the ways that I've shared with you that perfectionism could be costing you and your business. If you're a perfectionist, you are not alone. There is hope for you. You just need to first admit you have perfectionist tendencies so that you can accept the need to implement guardrails to curb your perfectionism. And I'm going to share with you some ways you can put some guardrails up for yourself. And I really just want to circle back on the point I just made, and that is to first admit that you have perfectionist tendencies. And that's huge because I've been sharing with you my story. I did not identify with that. And when you don't identify with that, you can't make a different choice. You can't say, I identify and now I understand that I may need to do some things to ensure that I can overcome those, that I do not fall prey to these challenges and costs and pay these costs unintentionally in my business and life. Stick with me. I'm going to share with you just a short list of ways in which I have seen with my clients being able to, set these guardrails and keep their perfectionism in check, as well as strategies that I use for myself. First strategy, empower someone to keep you in check. I'm going to give you an example because I use this strategy specifically for myself. You guys all heard me talk about Crystal. Crystal is my content manager, and we work on writing all of these episodes together. And when I'm writing and I'm coming up with something and I have content, look, there's times I can go down a rabbit hole of tweaking it. It's not good enough. We need, this story. We need this fact. Like maybe we come at it from a different angle, or, we're almost done with it, but I don't like where it went. Look, those are all things that anyone can say about any project they do. However, I have empowered my assistant and given her permission to say, it's good. And the trick here is that I trust her. And I've told her I can go down these rabbit holes and have these tendencies of wanting to question everything and tweak it in the pursuit of not failing, making it perfect. And she has been given permission to say, like, if we were not virtual, like put her hand on my shoulder and say, it's good. It's good enough. And that stops me in my tracks from spiraling. And it happens often. And so I know that it happens. I am aware of these tendencies, but it's a little bit more challenging when you're in it. Like in the moment, you're justifying why you need to keep tweaking it and going on and on and on with edits or practicing or doing it over and over again. In the moment, we don't have that same perspective. So empowering somebody else to keep you in check can be incredibly powerful. And I advise that it's somebody you trust. Next, set external hard deadlines so that you do not drag out tasks and projects. This I use a version of this, okay? So I know that I can work and rework presentations or speeches. So while I don't in general procrastinate or drag things out, when it comes to presentations, I have a whole process. I will write the presentation, I will write the script and edit it until Crystal and I both say it's good enough. And then I don't take it out until the night before. And I let myself have a very hard deadline of, look, this is tomorrow. So any tweaking has been shortened because I have a very hard external deadline. And had I not worked that process and finessed it over the years, what it would look like is I would write it. Maybe I did it 2 weeks before, a month before, and I would tweak and put too much time and energy into it where I was not getting a return on the investment. I probably wasn't even making it better. It was just this constant loop of worrying, and it was very counterproductive. Another way to set hard deadlines is specifically with a client, with a project due date, or maybe you set hard deadlines with your team members or with a significant other. Many of us work really well with external accountability. And so if that external accountability is not there, ask yourself, how can you create external accountability? And there are times where that can work for you. Now, this guardrail and strategy is not for everyone. If you do not work your best under pressure or external accountability is not the thing that holds your feet to the fire, then this strategy is not for you, and that's okay. Next, I would advise that when you are working on anything that you are creating, whether that's a product, an offering, a presentation, whatever it is that you're creating, before you start, get really clear on what version 1.0 is. And this goes back to Sheryl Sandberg's quote of done is better than perfect. And I also have another friend and mentor, Darren LaCroix, and he tweaked that same quote, and he says, done is more profitable than perfect. Both these quotes have the same essence to it. And what that means is you have to understand what done looks like. And one of the ways to do that is to give yourself permission that anything you create, there's going to be a version 1.0. Now, even with something as permanent as a podcast episode, I have version 1.0 of podcast episodes. I have redone podcast episodes from the early years where I'm like, the content is important. The content was really good, but man, we can take it to that next level. So we do another version of it. It's version 2.0 of the same content. And that's because either I've learned more, I've been able to say things in a different way, I have different stories or experiences. But what was true is that version 1.0 was good and it was helpful to people. And had I not gotten that out in the world, being worried about what 2.0 looked like, I would have been robbing people of potentially being able to help them. And I say that really from a place of, are you robbing the world of your unique skill set? Are you robbing the world of how you could show up if you gave yourself the permission to do something at version 1.0 and understanding that 2.0 is an option? Next and lastly, I use this guardrail, and this was taught to me by a dear friend of mine many, many years ago. And she shared with me this idea of, okay, so something's holding you back, fear of something. And instead of avoiding that fear and pushing those thoughts away, like, let's dive in and have some fun with it. I want you to consider, what is the worst case scenario? So when you recognize that you're spiraling and putting way too much time and effort into doing something, or maybe too much time and effort avoiding doing something, I want you to think about really, truly, what is the absolute worst case scenario if you were to deliver on this thing like right now, or do the thing right now. Like, what are you so afraid of that's going to happen? And I want you to get incredibly descriptive here. And you know what? Even if your mind lets you get incredibly crazy with what the worst case scenarios are to where you're laughing at yourself, chances are the majority of the time that we do this, our brains are like, and that's actually okay. I could deal with that. Or if that's the worst case scenario, I'm good. Or that worst case scenario is so ridiculous that isn't it funny how much my brain is lying to me? And I thought this was a really interesting exercise because my gut was like, oh, if you're having these negative thoughts, like try and stop them. Well, we know that doesn't actually work. So what could it look like if you leaned into them and then invited yourself to have a different perspective? This exercise has the power to get you out of your own head and see something very differently if you let it. If you have other ways that you use, the other strategies or methods to curb perfectionism, I would love to hear from you. Send me an email at amber@theproductivityspecialist.com, or better yet, hit me up on social media, either Instagram or Facebook, and comment on this episode and share with me, do you use one of these strategies? Will you use one of these strategies? Or perhaps you can share a strategy or method that I didn't share here today that could be helpful for other people on how to help them overcome these tendencies of perfectionism. To dive deeper into some of the ways perfectionism is showing up and get tips on how to conquer your perfectionism, we actually have a number of past episodes that dive deeper into each of them. I'm going to share those episodes with you here now. However, to get the links and the list of the episodes I'm sharing, head on over to amberdelagarza.com/318. You'll find all the show notes at amberdelagarza.com/318. So we have episode 74, The Biggest Productivity Killer No One Talks About, with Jacqueline Malone. Episode 224, Breaking Free from Codependency, Perfectionism, and People-Pleasing, with Victoria Albina. Episode 266, Breaking Free from Imposter Syndrome, with Melody Wildly. And episode 301, Unlocking the Secret to Building Confidence, with Nicole Khalil. Whether you are an excellent seeking perfectionist, failure avoiding perfectionist, or perhaps a combination of both, you do not have to let your innate desire to get it right and put your best work out there threaten your time, energy, money, health, relationships, self-esteem, joy, or success. You just need to take measures to curb your perfectionism by setting up guardrails that keep you from sabotaging yourself and your business. I have loved having you listen to this episode of Productivity Straight Talk, and I sure hope you found today's topic to be valuable, insightful, and giving you some strategies and methods that you can use as guardrails to curb your perfectionist tendencies. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So based on today's topic, your change may be just walking away from this episode, scratching your head and saying, oh my gosh, yes, I do have perfectionism tendencies. Or maybe it's the aha of how this is actually costing you and showing up in so many areas of your business and life, and you are ready to make the decision that you are going to purposely work on minimizing those tendencies so that they are not as big of a cost. Before we close out, I want to remind you about my Next Level Business Owner Quiz. If you did not do that at the top of this episode, you can go there right now by heading on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz to take this quick 3-minute quiz. And If you are looking to be working with a business coach that specifically focuses on productivity, time management, leading your team, business systems, organization, then I am your girl and we should be talking. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/work with me to find out ways that we can work together, either through my one-on-one coaching or my group coaching program. Again, that's amberdelagarza.com/work with me. And welcome if this is your first time tuning in to Small Business Straight Talk. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And if you've been here for a while, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave us a review over on iTunes. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.